This is just a quick summary of the different kind of loops that are available and their structure. And I'm just comparing them against each other so you see how they work. Essentially, loops have got four parts. There's some setting up you do before. There's some condition, and the loop continues as long as the condition is true. There's stuff the loop actually does, useful work. And finally, there's some kind of loop step, something you do each time around the loop to potentially change this condition from true, so it carries on, to false, so it stops. So for a while loop, we have some setup beforehand, which might be initializing some variable or doing some reading of data or whatever. We then say while condition, and condition can be something simple, like something's equal to something, or it could be some complex combination of this and that or the other. But that's got to be true as long as the loop continues. Now this is a while loop. It doesn't have to be true to start with. It could be false immediately, in which case we don't ever do any of this. But if this condition is true, we go ahead and do the body of the loop, the useful work, and then we do our loop step, which might be like adding some value to a counter or doing something which essentially changes this condition and possibly changes it from true to false. Then we go back again and check the condition again. If it's still true, we go through this loop again, and then we carry on as many times going around and around here as long as this condition is true. But at some point, some change made here will make this go from true to false, and then we'll stop. For loop is fundamentally exactly the same as a while loop. You can create for loops that do exactly the same things as while loops. The syntax is different. We use the word for. We have three things separated by semicolons here. The first one says this is the setup condition. That's what goes before the while loop up here. In the for loop it goes between the bracket and the first semicolon. Then between the two semicolons we have the condition. As long as this condition is true, we keep going round and round this loop. And then we have the loop step here. Now, because for loops are mainly for loops that are intended to be executed a fixed number of times, where we know at the start how many times that is, then generally speaking this is often create a variable, set it to 0, check to see if this variable is less than some value, add 1 to that variable. That's a very common model. And of course then, because we've got so much of the stuff up in here, then the actual body of the loop is shorter. We just have the useful work within it. The do loop is slightly different in that we will definitely execute the do loop once, but structurally it is very similar. We have the setup again at the beginning, whatever that is. Then we have do, semicolon, the actual useful body of the loop, what we go away and do. Then the loop step, the thing that might change the condition from true to false. Then finally, down here we have the actual closing curly bracket, and then while, and then the condition here. And as long as this condition is true, we keep doing this loop. Unlike these, which don't have a semicolon here or here, this one does have a semicolon at the end. Now, one thing that can actually blur this a bit is that in practice, sometimes there may not be a difference between these two steps. Sometimes the actual useful work you do within the loop automatically changes the condition, and there's nothing you can separately identify as this thing here. No separate single statement that says and now do something that updates the condition. It might just be a consequence of this bit here, and that's also going to be true for the do loop too. In the case of a for loop, that's much less likely to be the case because we've got this separate bit here, and because of the reason we have for loops is different to the reason we have while loops and do loops. While loops, as I've said now many times, are when you don't know when you start the loop how many times you're going to do it. Do loops, again, you don't know how many times you're going to do the loop when you start, but you know it'll be at least once because you're not going to test the condition until you get to the end of it. For loops are when you do know at the start how many times you're going to do the loop.